Peregrine, thank you for joining us today, and perhaps we could start with you giving us a brief introduction as to who you are, how you came to be an architect, and the sort of projects you've worked on in the past.
Well, I've always enjoyed, from my earliest years, I've enjoyed design and drawing, but I really only decided on architecture as a vocation shortly before going to university, which I went to Cambridge for 5 years. Soon after qualification, I joined a small practice run by Jeremy Benson and his wife, who specialised in his work in historic buildings and worked on a number of National Trust buildings and elsewhere. And I discovered what an absolutely fascinating avenue that was, and I've been involved in it ever since. After quite a few years, I became their partner, and when Jeremy was wanting to retire, I left and set up my own practice where I'm now sitting in Fulham Palace, where the Bishop of London used to live. And we have, all that time, I've specialised in work on historic buildings, sometimes adapting them, sometimes adding to them or extending them, and trying to do so in a sympathetic way. And when I started my own practice after Jeremy retired, there were just a few of us. I think we started off with 3 or 4, and we're now about 18 strong.
Brilliant, brilliant. And how did you first get involved with the Stationers Company? Was it with on the Tokefield Centre project, or prior to that?
In fact, it was prior to that. The company held interviews in 2014 for architects to undertake an options appraisal to review how the hall might be reorganised to improve its circulation, and in particular to achieve accessible, proper disabled access to all levels, or as many levels as we could, because, as you know, the existing building, which has been developed over centuries, has endless changes of level, and resolving them all is difficult, but we've gone a certain way towards that. And once we'd come up with that options appraisal, which obviously there have been a lot of iterations since then, but it's like a sort of Rubik's Cube. You can't do one thing before you've done another thing, and so on and so on. And the first activity was to do the Tokefield Centre to house the archive, which had previously been on the upper levels above the courtroom. And that freed up that upstairs space and then gave us options for taking the thing forward. So that's where the Tokefield started. And yes, that's the beginnings of our involvement, and we've gone on since.
So when you take on a project like that, how does an architect set out to take the brief and then put pencil lines and plans on paper?
Well, it's, again, as I was saying, it's a very iterative process. I mean, it involves a huge number of meetings, both with individuals and committees of the Worshipful Company, of stationers and newspaper sellers, as well as with Historic England and the City of London and all sorts of other interested parties. So the brief was developed broadly with them to, as I was saying before, to achieve accessibility, and also to enable more than one function to be carried on within the hall at one time, so that hopefully when we're done, you can have something going on in the Great Hall and a separate function in the courtroom. And the key to that was the new link building, which is the sort of core of what we're doing at the moment, which both contains a lift to give us our accessibility and also a new entrance from the courtyard to enable direct access to that side of the building for the guests. And the link building itself is a very complex bit of three-dimensional design, trying to squeeze an awful lot into a small space, because we've got to achieve access up from the kitchen, access to up through the building, a lift up through the building, and a replacement for the anteroom. And so it's been very complicated. And I guess, you know, out of those discussions and thoughts and meetings comes the design.
Excellent. And did when the company were talking to you, did they place any special emphasis on sustainability or energy economy?
Yes, they did. Obviously, with a historic building, it's very difficult to achieve contemporary standards of insulation. But we've done what we can. The aim is we're going to improve the insulation over the Great Hall and also up over the courtroom. And we're also doing various what are called passive control measures in terms of solar control blinds in the Great Hall and other rooms. And in terms of reducing our carbon footprint, which is obviously another thing that we are keen to, and the company was keen to do, we're switching the source of heat, which will also provide cooling, to the courtroom, the Great Hall, and all the new accommodation, from boilers, gas boilers, to condensers, which are located at the south end of the Great Hall. And those will provide the heating and cooling, as I say, and they will actually reduce the carbon output of the system by 80%. So that's a step in the right direction towards the planet. There's a long way to go.
Yeah. So you and your colleagues have been working on Vision 350 for years, but it was only at the start of the year that the contract was signed with the contractors. How does that work? I mean, how do you go about developing a project without actually having a relationship until quite late in the day with the people actually going to do the building? Well,
right. I mean, it would be desirable to have a contractor involved early on, and in fact, we did what was called a two-stage tender, which is that we went through a tender process of having a long list of contractors, sending them what's called a pre-qualification questionnaire, which gives them a list of questions that they answer, and then we came to a short list of contractors. Then we went to tender on not complete information, but as complete, but reasonably complete, and we whittled out of they tendered, and we chose the sort of lowest few tenderers, interviewed them, and selected one out of those contractors. And then we were able to have about several months working with them to revise the design and refine it, and use their expertise in doing that. And that's a useful process, because you do bring in the sort of practical expertise of a contractor.
And as the project goes on, what is your enduring role in it?
Non-stop. That making visits to site as and when needed, attending site meetings, which of course at the moment are largely by Zoom, as we are now, and responding to requests for information from the contractor, and also of course meeting with client committees regularly to discuss the project, and also with what's called a finishes committee to refine the finishes of the final building, so that hopefully we end up with something that is fit for purpose and people are happy with.
Excellent. I mean, everybody's feeling a bit glum about it at the moment, because it all feels very much as if it's in the sort of demolition and destruction process. Maybe with your background knowledge, you could come up with, say, 3 points in the project which we could look forward to and report on.
Yes, I mean, we could make those as regular as you like. I don't know whether I'm not terribly good on the sort of on the social media. But I mean, we could have a regular Instagram of sort of showing progress, and we could also do newsletters.
Yes.
Obviously, at the moment, as you say, we're through the demolition phase, and hopefully, and we found a bit of archaeology, which is causing a bit of a hiccup. But it's also quite interesting to find the walls of the earlier hall. And it's just a question of how we deal with them and try not to do too much damage to them. So from now on, before long, it'll be going up rather than coming down. I'm very happy to discuss what would work best with the company in terms of sort of having more interviews, which I think is something that has been suggested, where other folk, the contractor's point of view at a certain point. So I'm not sure whether that helps you in particular.
Yes. Well, we'll certainly touch base again on that and revisit it as the project makes progress. So finally, on a lighter note, do you have a favourite building in the City of London, and is there a building you would like to see never again?
Well, I'm a great fan of Nicholas Hawksmoor, a really brilliant architect. But the majority of his churches and buildings are outside London, well, outside the city, I should say. In other words, sort of St Christchurch, Spitalfields, St Anne's, Limehouse, and St George in the East, which are all wonderful buildings. But there is one little church by Hawksmoor called St Anne, St Mary Woolnoth, which is just trying to think of Cheapside, and it's a sweet, a beautiful little building. I mean, very characteristic of Hawksmoor, a very dramatic building on a small site. And I think that's if I've got to pick one, and you asked for one, that would be it. And in terms of what I would like to get rid of, I'm not going to be very original, I think, in suggesting that the walkie-talkie, a good one for the chop. I mean, there's quite a lot of competition, but I think that would be my top of the list, or whatever.
Thank you very much, Peregrine. And I think it would be good, perhaps, if from time to time we could do this kind of thing. We'll be putting this on the website for everybody to see, and to hopefully cheer everybody up as so that they can feel progress is being made. And that would be good to touch base again from time to time. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm very happy to do that. Good.